during periods like they are right now, when when the economy or the economics are challenging, be a little hesitant in simply going out there to and pulling things out of the ration, pulling things out of your program, even on the health side of it or the breeding side of it or whatever, but pulling things out that you think are going to save you money. And they may very well save you money today, tomorrow, for the coming week or the coming month, but in the long run, they can have some pretty significant implications.
Hello and welcome to the Dairy Podcast Show again. This is Mark Thomas, and it's a pleasure to be the host today and introduce to you Steve Blezinger from Reveille Livestock Concepts. Steve comes to us today from Central Texas. Many years of experience working in the nutrition area, both with beef and dairy cattle. So Steve, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it very much.
So as we get started here, we took some time to connect before this recording, but if you can give the audience a little bit of a background of where you come from and how you got started in the industry and your years of experience, certainly wide range, some similarities between what we have done, some international work and so forth. So great to have the opportunity to visit with you today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. My name is Steve Blezinger. My company is Reveille Livestock Concepts. We're based out of Central Texas. I'm kind of a native Texan, and as hard as I've tried to go someplace else, I always seem to end up here. Have been in the, ruminant nutrition industry for at least 30 years. I grew up on a cattle farm here in Texas, and went in some other directions, but went back to graduate school, collected a couple of degrees from Texas A&M, and shortly after graduating from them in 91, went to work for a company called Ag Products, and was immediately thrown into the dairy arena. And as we discussed a little earlier, at that point in time, about the only thing I knew about the dairy industry was that milk came from black and white cows. And so it was a super learning experience. It was a trial by fire. And but since then, for the last 30 years or 30 plus years, I've actually worked on both on the dairy side and on the beef cattle side, which has been a very, very interesting learning experience as well, because there are things that happen in the beef cattle industry that I think make me a little bit better dairy nutritionist, and vice versa. So that's been a great learning experience. In addition to the work on directly with farms, I do a fair amount of corporate work with different companies in supporting their products, helping with research and development. I guess you call it technical marketing support, things of that nature. And that's given me the opportunity to work, do a fair amount of international work. I've worked with different companies in Mexico, like in the Torreon area, Mark, where I understand you're from, or living rather. And then also in other parts of the world, China, India, Pakistan, Turkey, the Middle East. It's been quite an interesting experience. So that's a lot of what the way I've been spending the last few years. I do also coordinate some research projects for some companies as well, and that has also been quite an interesting experience also.
Our Yeast 40 is a natural biotechnology from ICC designed to boost the health and productivity of animals under challenging production systems. Our Yeast 40 performance is supported by an unique processing technology that results in a pure product containing high levels of beta-glucans, MOS, and yeast metabolites. These factors, combined, promote the ruminal and intestinal modulation, helping the animals to reach their full potential.
So, Steve, sounds like a very interesting and varied background, and I really like your point about the working in different areas or with the beef side, because as we spoke about a bit before getting on this recording, our partners, Feedlot Health by TELUS, as we work with them, sometimes people say, well, what's a dairy group doing being partners with a beef group? And exactly, right? There's so many really similarities, plenty of differences, right? But how do we take concepts from different industries and really challenge ourselves a bit to think outside the box? Well, gee, what we do this on beef, why can't we do this on dairy or vice versa, right? And obviously with the now crossbreeding beef on dairy, where is those lines on beef versus dairy? I guess every good dairy cow eventually becomes a beef cow, hopefully, right?
Exactly. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, and that, if you don't mind me, that's been one thing that I've worked with a number of my dairies over the years. One of the questions always becomes, okay, I have all of these bull calves that I've got to deal with, and there's been a variety of I guess methods that farms have used to, I guess, eventually get them off of the farm. And and a lot of the producers that I've had the pleasure of working with have been intimidated by the idea of those calves out and potentially finishing them, simply because they throw that into the beef cattle side, and they're somewhat intimidated by the idea. And there's a real opportunity for a revenue stream there, on a farm that's maybe not doing something like that. So anyway, so I apologize, I interrupted you, and but I just wanted to mention that.
No, not at all. And I think that's a really great point as we bring these industries together and really work for the common goal of efficiency in the industry and animal care, animal welfare side of things. So given that, Steve, what are some of the hot topics that you deal with day to day that you'd like to share with our audience today? I know you said you worked in research, but obviously very much sounds like boots on the ground, practical, working with your clients. So where do you see the opportunities right now? Unfortunately, we're in this another downturn in milk price, which we'd rather not talk about, but we have to because it's real. How do you what do you recommend to your clients to get through these low times?
Right. Well, a significant portion of this is, and we're doing much better as an industry now than we used to, but that is really looking at things like, just farm efficiency. From my standpoint as a nutritionist, I'm looking at, feed efficiency, which is something that, the dairy industry has really only grasped and wrapped their arms around in the last few years. And I think that is an area that we have more work to do in. We have more work to get a good grasp on, okay, what does it mean to efficiently feed cattle? Because not only are we trying to push for production components, health and reproduction, but we're trying to do that as inexpensively as we possibly can. But like in periods like we're going through right now, we have a tendency of attempting to cut costs in such a way that it may actually be detrimental to the animal. It may be detrimental to the overall herd health. And I'll give you an example. One thing that's been common over the years is when we've gotten into these periods of time like this, the farm's trying to reduce cost. Well, one of the first things they will want to do is start maybe, cheapening up their mineral and vitamin premixes, their additive premixes, and a lot of times that's going to be a combination product. but cheapening that thing down, or maybe even taking it out. There've been plenty of situations like that, and for the short term, that might not be too much of a problem. But I would like to suggest that it's a problem in the short term and in the long term. I realize that there's a cost there, but what does that cost? Say if you save a few pennies on that now, what's that going to result in a month or 3 months or 6 months or something like that, when things like maybe immune response has been compromised, things of that nature. And I think we have to be very careful with that. And then the other side of that is that, if we're trying to improve efficiency by, especially by reducing cost, there's going to be some longer term decisions that have to be made in preparation for periods like this, because they're inevitably going to happen. For every good, for every good milk check that we get, we probably get 5 that are not so good. And the point being is that, we need to be doing things like, really carefully strategizing, like the forages that we're using. If we're producing, if the farm is producing its own silage or hay or whatever the case might be, are we making the right decisions as far as what those silage species are, whether corn silage or grass or whatever the case might be, and really focusing on, what is that bringing to the table, especially when we get into periods like this. So there's really lots and lots of areas that you kind of have to focus on, and and it's a matter of, what is the best way to I guess, spend the money that's there in order to support production and support performance.
Those are all really relevant comments, and obviously in any cycle, but especially right now. I guess more specifically on the topic of forage quality, for many years in the industry, where do you see today some of the real opportunities in forage? From the hybrid selection to the planting, harvest, storage, and so forth. What are some areas that you really focus on with your clients, where you see there's obviously it's all of that, but where you really get that bang for the buck on excellent forage quality?
Well, I mean, and it's there's not one specific area. You mentioned, several different things. You mentioned, species selection. What variety are you going to use? I know I've had the opportunity to work with several farms that actually they also had an agronomist on their consulting staff, and I know I've learned a tremendous amount from those folks. There are such a huge number of different, and let's just talk about corn silage. There are a huge number of different varieties that can be used. I think that has to be those varieties have to be very carefully screened. I think it's important to look at the research. I'm sure you guys have probably done some of that, some of that type of work, to look at, not only the amount of dry matter a given variety can produce, look at digestibility, and just how that plant can be turned into feed in the long run. Then the other side of that is looking at, what is your harvest process? What is your, I guess your packing and storage process? Are you using an inoculant? What inoculant are you using? All of those types of things come together to produce a significant volume of your feed for the foreseeable future. And whatever decisions are made early on going into that, it has a big effect on me and my job. And honestly, I want to take all of the advantages that I can to make my job a little bit easier. So, but at the same time, we're not talking about a month or two. We may be talking about, a year. It really depends. So there's just, I really can't emphasize enough how important that part of I guess that part of the picture really is. And, the need we have of doing the best background and research work on that type of thing that we can.
Really getting it right the first time, right? Because as you said, if you have a pile that's going to last 6, 8, 12 plus months, that hurts a lot when that's not the ideal quality especially for milk cows.
Right. Another thing, and I'll just touch on this real quickly, something we run into a lot of times. I've dealt with an awful lot of farms that, say they didn't, they had as part of their ration, we were using, a hay of some type. Maybe we were using a alfalfa. Maybe we were using a grass hay. They were not always producing that themselves, which means they were reaching out and buying it from someone. And that is a whole nother can of worms when we talk about that, that hay market and what that can be, and the need to get, proper analyses of that, and, getting what you pay for, when you're investing that kind of money. So to me, that's another very important part of this picture.
To move on a little bit to research, Steve, you mentioned that you do some contract research, and over the years you've done some different projects. Anything from the recent past, or something you're working on now that's mentioned in the area of yeast and some supplements? So anything to share from that standpoint?
Right. Yeah. I think I mentioned to you, we're in the process right now of working on coordinating a couple of yeast studies, one on the beef cattle side, one on the dairy side. On the dairy cattle side, we are looking at a yeast product that I work with quite a bit. Mark, is it okay to mention a particular name, or do we want to stay away from that?
Certainly. No, I guess, one of the goals is for our producers to have some take-home things they can implement tomorrow morning. So if there's some good, reliable data, yes.
Absolutely. Well, this particular product, it's the trade name here in the U.S., it's called Yeast 40. Other parts of the world, it's called ruminant yeast. It's produced by ICC Brazil. It's a Brazilian product. And I've been working with this product in some shape, form, or fashion for 10 years now, something like that. The study that we're working on coordinating is with a robot dairy in central Texas, north central Texas. And it will give us, and it's the first time that we've coordinated a study in a robot operation. It's going to be interesting because there's so much data. You mentioned one thing that your company does is you're very, very data driven. There's so much data that's generated or collected by these robot dairies. It will give us a tremendous amount of opportunity not to just look at the effect on, just milk production, component production, animal health, reproduction, but it'll also be able to help give us the opportunity to break that down with individual animal data, and looking at, because, within a given group of cows or a given herd of cows, you're going to have different levels of dry matter intake. You're going to have different levels, like in a dairy, you may have different levels of your supplement intake, which is how we're going to deliver this particular yeast product. And it'll give us a more specific idea of, dosage rates and the effective dosage rates on, milk production and, component effects and things of that nature. And I guess what I'm saying is it'll help us dial down a whole lot more closely on, a lot of times maybe we as nutritionists don't pay the kind of attention that we should to feeding levels of different products, different additives. Maybe we don't get as specific as we should. And some of this data I'm thinking can help us get exactly that done. And, the other side of that is, we have the opportunity to look at, the effects on, there was some previous work done at the University of Florida with this product, and they did quite a lot of work on looking at starch metabolism, the effects of pH, with product use on ruminal pH and starch challenges, and subsequently the effect that may have on on rumen function, on and other fat levels, protein levels, things of that nature. So we have what we're having, I guess, the biggest challenge with as I work on putting the protocol together for this is being able to limit the amount of data that we will be able to collect into a manageable level. So I've kind of rambled a bit on that, but really excited about the opportunities that we may bring from this.
That sounds like a great opportunity, Steve. And I think as we work with more and more technologies, especially on robotic dairies and the ability to get more data, really starts to answer more and more questions, right? What specifically looking into, I know the supplements, and probably that's a really great place to talk about a bit. With again current milk price, really having the data and the confidence that these added supplements, which cost in most cases cents a day, but that adds up significantly, especially when the margin on milk is a lot lower. So I guess as you work with your clients in that area, obviously you're doing some of your own research, but how do you make those decisions or help your clients make those decisions? What are the types of data you're looking for and so forth in order to, there's a new product, maybe something like this yeast product that you've been working with. What helps you guide those decisions for your dairy clients?
Well,
and your beef clients.
Sure. I like to look at, like if let's say, for instance, a company, and we all have this when we're in my position, in your position, we have, various products that are brought to us for consideration for use on our farms and for use with our clients. And, and it's been interesting to me over the years at the I guess the wide range of data, and in a lot of cases just basic information that that ends up on my desk to look at. What I really like to look at and have to consider is a certain amount of more formal research, something that is done maybe in a very controlled environment, so we can really look at the specifics of how that product works. But at the same time, along with that, I do like to see the farm trials that someone may have done, because I like to see how it works in the real world. At the end of the day, we can run these trials in the very controlled environments of a university or a university farm, assuming that all of that research has been done correctly, and there's plenty of opportunities for it not to be done correctly. But to do that, but then also look at it, when I take that product out of that environment and I put it into this farm in this location or that farm in that location, and we know, just if we look at nothing more than the United States, we have a really wide variety of production environments. And if I can see research that has been done in similar production environments to what my farms may be, where they may be located at, where they may be at, that's more helpful. And a specific example of that is, if you're working with a farm in the Texas Panhandle, where we're looking at mostly dry lot dairies, very mostly corn silage diets, things of that nature. If someone brings me a study that has been based out of the part of the world that you originally came from, up in the Northeast, on Yes, it may be silage, but it's a completely different environmental conditions and forage types, and just growing conditions and things of that nature. I like to see those diverse trials, but I have to see something that applies to that that particular farm environment that I'm considering. And that's kind of a pretty big, I guess pretty varied answer. But I mean, for me, there's an awful lot of things that I like to look at when it comes to making a decision on, yes, we want to try this product.
So, Steve, your answer would be really much in line with our reply if I was asked that question. And I think what we say all the time, with our group, especially working in many different regions, from, like you said, the Northeast to the Central Valley of California to Torreon, Mexico, high desert, is exactly that. Okay, how does a product perform in a ration that's maybe almost 65% forage, high corn silage diet, haylage in the Northeast, compared to some rations that are in the low 30s on forage in regions like Torreon, and exactly pen size, right? We have dairies that have 350 or more cows per pen, and there's a trial done in a divided pen of 25 cows, right? What is the behavior, the feeding behavior, the biology, all of that affects a feed additive or some other management strategy. So, really great to hear you say that. I think those are the types of trials or information that get us thinking, right? Okay, what's the potential? What's the possibility? But then, okay, how would this perform under these other situations? So so great to hear you're certainly aligned with that thought process.
And if I might, Mark, one thing that I think that we probably need to do a little bit better job on, like for myself as a nutritionist, we tend to be focused so much just on, we've developed these rations, we're using these additives, and it's having this effect on milk production and component levels. I've gotten over the years to where I feel like it's very, very important for me to have a good relationship with whoever the veterinarian or the consulting vet is on that particular farm, because I guess that's one thing that I've recognized over the years of how tied together or how interlaced nutrition, animal health, reproduction, how everything is. And it's good to have that discussion, that line of discussion, with the vet, so that I know for certain that if I'm formulating in a certain trace mineral profile, that we're having a positive effect on mastitis levels, on just animal health in general, and on cull rates, on breeding function, things of that nature. I mean, it's everything's tied together, and it's important, I think, that we recognize that, and that we work together to deal with those things.
Oh, there we go. Yes. No, I said that's really great to hear, because over the years, what we've seen in many cases is that disconnect between veterinarians and nutritionists. And I think that's a great topic to bring up, for those listening, is that, working as a team, so many times the nutritionist gets blamed, or the ration gets blamed, when it's far from the ration. It's the management and everything else, right? So I think having that working relationship, early on, I always tried to form those relationships. And I also recall well, when I first started doing nutrition as a dairy veterinarian, I had a nutritionist approach me and actually said, and this was 20 plus years ago, what's a veterinarian doing putting their hands in nutrition? And my reply was, well, name for me a disease of economic importance on the dairy that's not related to nutrition. And I think it's malpractice for me to not understand nutrition to some extent and to work either with a nutritionist or actually, perhaps feed some herds. So that's great. But I think for those folks listening, nutritionists, producers, veterinarians is really try to align and bring those relationships together. Reach out, a phone call, an email, go out to dinner, get to know each other, and how do we work together to reach the goals of the dairy? And especially in nutrition and veterinary medicine, there in most cases there shouldn't be any competition there, right? Let's work together to make things better and understand the challenges too, because just had a conversation recently with a colleague, and it's really easy to maybe blame the nutritionist or blame the veterinarian when the forage quality was the issue that they had no control over. That's what they had to work with. And they said, sure, you can come on our dairy and see this issue, but without better forage, we can't get to that point. It's coming, but today we can't fix that like that. So I really appreciate those comments.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and again, we have to keep in mind that as much as we get wrapped up in what we're doing ourselves individually, at the end of the day, we're still working for that dairyman, and and our goal, it should be our goal, is to make sure he's got the best, most cost-effective performance that he can get, the best animal health, everything that's involved, because, at the end of the day, if he's not there, then it gives us one less thing to do. And that's not a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that's, especially if there's any younger producers, nutritionists, veterinarians listening, I think there's a great opportunity to, in your early career, build those relationships, get to know those folks, and hopefully they'll reciprocate. I know sometimes I've tried to reach out to someone and they haven't. Well, keep making those contacts, keep trying to build those relationships, I believe.
Right, absolutely.
Data shows most cattle don't get enough beta-carotene. DSM's Victus Transition can help support your cattle's fertility and colostrum quality through beta-carotene supplementation. Learn more at dsm.com/Victus Transition.
It's time for our famous 3. Maximize profitability and herd health with early detection in animal health, reproduction, calving, and feeding. The most advanced bolus technology and professional support from agricultural experts makes this possible. SMAX Tech, the health system that future-proofs your operation.
So, Steve, a few of the questions that we tend to wrap up as we bring the podcast to the end is one is what's either a book or publication, or in some cases it's a other resource, online resource that you reach to and would recommend to the audience for dairy specifically, or in this case, beef or agriculture in general?
Well, I'd have to say right now, probably one of the more useful pieces of information that's out there is the new, we used to refer to it as the NRC, but it's the new NAESM or whatever that publication is known now. But the new dairy NRC that came out just a year or so ago has got some very, very good information there. Like I mentioned to you earlier, I tend to be real focused on the mineral side of things. A lot of the newer mineral data, the newer mineral requirements for or I guess how we go about feeding has been particularly useful to me, and in fine tuning a lot of the work that I've done there. So I'd have to tell you that that's probably one of the really important ones that I see right at this point in time.
No, that's a great. I know it's not necessarily the book you pick up to read, right? But certainly it's a great reference. And I think if you do, what I found is, sometimes a topic comes up and you can actually read a section or chapter, if you will, if that's on fats, if you will. But yeah, it's certainly not something to sit down and dig into. I think we'll still NASEM, but we'll probably all still refer to it as the NRC or the new NRC, right? As we maybe try to disconnect now and again, some of us are better than others at that. But any recent read, documentary, or anything that sparked some interest to share with others?
I know right now one thing that I am spending a fair amount of time trying to wrap my brain around, and is, we're all hearing about, how all of the advancements in AI, in artificial intelligence, is affecting. We're looking at it in terms of how it affects, the media and how it affects things on the internet and so on, but there are going to be some very significant implications on how that works within, you mentioned earlier on the data that we collect, on farm, and the ability that's going to give us. And I'm going to stick my neck out and say, on the positive side, because there's so many people that are really looking at the negative side of that. But I think there's going to be an opportunity to really help us manage the massive amount of data that we collect on the farm, and I think it can help us in decision-making processes. But the problem that we have is the average guy, like myself, or a lot of dairymen, beef cattle producers. We understand about that much of what they're talking about when we're hearing them discuss that. So so that's an area that, like I said, I'm spending a fair amount of time really kind of reading whatever I can get my hands on that helps me understand how that works, how it can be applied to different disciplines, how it can be used in agriculture, in dairying, whatever the case might be. So, so I would give to you that's kind of where, some things that I'm looking at right now.
And that's really interesting, Steve. I know in our group here, quite a few of us have been looking to chat GPT for, some answers. And I think a really important point, if you are somewhat of an expert, if you will, or very knowledgeable in that field, you've perhaps find that some of those replies are pretty good, but need some editing, right? So I think what's kind of neat is it could make you look really good to edit that and then be able to share something from there. But if you are not knowledgeable in the industry, be careful too, right? Because some of that information is not quite correct or is pretty vague. And, so I think probably a good lesson, be careful, right? You got to filter all of that. Yeah. But it is pretty cool and really amazing sometimes with the speed at which you get some generated reply.
Well, it has made me wonder a little bit, because I've been blessed or cursed, or however you put it, to have the opportunity to write for a number of publications, in either on the beef cattle side, dairy cattle side, over the last number of years. And I've been wondering, as I've been kind of perusing this stuff, going, okay, am I about to work am I about to be worked out of a job? Just simply because a magazine editor can go, okay, I need all the information you can give me on XYZ topic. I don't have to call Steve to get that done. So it's kind of made me a little, I guess, a little concerned about that.
No, that's been a little bit of the joke in some of these platforms, is that it will replace certain employees perhaps. But again, I'll still say the benefit, hopefully someone with knowledge of that topic is reviewing that before it gets published, because you want to make sure that the AI got it right. And then as we close, a word to the folks out there is regarding what separates those dairy producers that are successful, and there's many ways to measure success. It's beyond milk production, but a successful business compared to those who, maybe struggle. Or unfortunately, I just heard in the last week of 2 dairies that are selling with this downturn in the Northeast. And, that's, as you said, we don't want to see that, but that's the reality of those businesses that haven't been able to strive. So, what you have many years of experience. You've seen businesses come and go. You've seen those that have probably been with you your entire career. What are some of those key points that have kept them to be successful businesses?
Sure, and that's a really good question, and I think the list is probably longer than we have time to cover, but and these are in no order of priority. That's just things that I've seen. Really one of them is a willingness to learn and a willingness to pay attention to the things that are going on, pay attention to the developments, and understanding that, and I run into this more in the beef cattle industry than I do in the dairy industry, but we have a tendency to get locked into, we've always done it this way, where we can't change anything. So we have to be open to the new things and the change. I mean, you don't necessarily run straight there to it, but you have to be open to that. Paying attention to detail. The small things can eat you alive if you're not paying attention to that. Dairy I worked with, a number of years ago, we were doing a great job on the rations we were building. We had great ingredients. Everything worked great until we got to the point where the feed was being delivered onto the feed lane, and the guy that was delivering feed did a horrible job of making sure that there was an even amount of feed going out to those cows, and it was partly his problem, partly the mixer wagon's problem, and that problem had been there for a couple of years before I got there, and the dairyman had just never noticed it. So paying attention to detail is a big thing. The farms that I have seen that have been just historically the most successful have been the ones that have been very careful about managing debt, ending up saddling yourself with too much debt, either in terms of buying cows, building facilities, buying equipment, things of that nature. It's a necessary evil, but at the same time, you really, really need to be very, very careful with that. And when you look at this, when you look at the scale of some of the modern dairy farms that we have that are, you're looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of cows, the financial aspect of that can be pretty overwhelming. So, so that's a big part of it. And then, I guess the last thing that I would throw out there, and it goes back to something we talked about earlier, is that during periods like they are right now, when the economy or the economics are challenging, be a little hesitant in simply, going out there to and pulling things out of the ration, pulling things out of your program, even on the health side of it or the breeding side of it or whatever, but pulling things out that you think are going to save you money. And they may very well save you money today, tomorrow, for the coming week or the coming month, but in the long run, they can have some pretty significant implications. So that's 3 or 4 things that just immediately come to mind when I think about that.
Well, I think those are excellent points. Always being open to learning all the time. I guess I look forward to that every day, learning something new, and then debt control within and cost control within reason, and those comments hit home also as in my career as a veterinarian, seeing things like minerals, like you said, vaccines, reproductive programs removed for the cost, and then the effect, the downstream effect of that was far greater losses and economic losses than the savings of those pennies. So the strategic, least cost is not always the best. It's maximum output or maximum gains, right? So, yeah. So, Steve, it's been a real pleasure to visit with you today. I guess also interesting how a lot of your thoughts and concepts are things that we hold as important also, and it's great to hear that as we work with producers, whether that be beef, dairy, or other industries. So again, thanks to all our listeners today for tuning into the Dairy Podcast Show. We look forward to visiting with you again soon on future podcasts. And Steve, again, thanks for taking your time today.
You bet. Thank you, Mark. It's been a real pleasure.